This is breaking news from Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner holding a press conference in Washington. You'll see the banners below, a briefing on Social Security and Medicare trustees report. And we've got the two. We're thrilled to have you here. Plus Andrew Samwick this morning on radio, Bloomberg Surveillance. Matthew Slaughter from Tuck. You're not with Tuck. You're with Dartmouth,
I'm not
right?
with Tuck, but I could say that both Andrew Samwick and Matt Slaughter I hired in 1994.
Well, good.
So
you were going
way back when.
Way back when he was a little guy.
Before the first gray hair. Matt Slaughter, your gray hair gets you to 2024. That's like tomorrow in your racket, isn't it?
It is. So that date is approaching, and this news shows the magnitude of the fiscal problems that America faces.
Will it move the political debate?
I hope, but we'll see. The political debate right now seems to be focused on the debt ceiling. We need to find a way to not have the debt ceiling stop the more important conversations of trying to figure out how we address these long and term fiscal instability.
Your colleague Andrew Samwick had a big, thick Social Security book me and my viewers will never read even 5 pages of. Do you trust the model, the plug-ins that the government uses as they try to reach out decades?
Well, obviously the worry is that these forecasts are subject to huge amounts of error. One of the big things they're subject to, if we could generate lots of growth, then those figures are better. But if we don't, they're even worse than they've predicted. So I think Matt's right. This is a major worry. You're going to have to solve this thing. And you said a long time ago, you need to get some success. And this is something you could potentially get a success over. And we have to avoid, I'm going to ask Matt, is it going to be, would it be Armageddon if we let
Well, bring up chart 3 here before we get to Matt. Bring it up here, folks, because I spent too much time in academics. Look at this chart. Entitlements. Discuss. That's what Slaughter would say on a Tuck exam. It would be this. I hate these questions in academics. There's the chart. Up we go, and the slope gets bigger. Matthew, discuss this right now. What's the prescription, the apolitical prescription, to just get out in front of 2024?
So first thing is make sure everybody understands what the real facts are.
Right.
Second, then, is to say we need to find a way to slow the rate of growth of entitlement spending. Social Security is easier to do than Medicare and Medicaid. Social Security has just the demographic challenge of an aging population. So the solutions there are some combination of a slight increase in the retirement age, more means testing, perhaps slowing the rate of growth of how benefits get paid out. Some combination of those things fixes Social Security.
Jargon alert, Rex. What's means testing really mean?
Higher income, high wealth people get less Social Security payments.
So is that a tax on them? Or is that they get less of their cash they put aside?
Look, it's a pay-as-you-go system. So it is saying the benefits we were promising you, we can't afford to pay.
And the reason for that is people have been paying an amount of money thinking, let's say, that they're going to retire for 20 years. And the reality is they're going to live longer than that. And in a sense, the public has to understand you need to pay more because you're going to live longer. But that's something the public hasn't quite understood, right?
Right. And I think the broader issue comes back to an insight Danny had, which is part of how we need to talk about the facts is the reason we need to curtail spending on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid somehow is to help support economic growth for the overall economy, to fund the kind of investments in infrastructure, education. Those needs haven't gone away. Globalization makes those bigger needs. We need to do more of that.
And really, the logic that I have with it, you can't afford to have so much consumption now. What we really need to do is get money going into investment. That's the way we go forward. That's the way to raise productivity. An increase in productivity does it too, but you're not going to get that by spending all the money on a
I want to stay on entitlements here. Chart 4. Which is a chart that I think will surprise people. We've shown this before. It's an art chart. I look like a professor today. What's that about? Slaughter considers economic growth and taxes. And you can see income tax receipts to GDP. And the fact is they've rolled over. This is a mathy question. We need some math here. Have they rolled over because the denominator GDP isn't moving like it used to move, or are they rolling over because tax receipts are really that much less?
So tax receipts are a lot less today. We're at about 15% of GDP. That's very low historically. That reflects the shock to the real economy and the financial system, lower tax receipts from individuals and from asset prices. So part of how we solve the entitlement challenges is can we do things to support economic growth in America? That's a really important part of the fiscal conversation.
Great question for you, too. I don't know if you agree. What nominal top-line GDP do we need to get Slaughter's growth and to get those tax revenues to come back? in the U.S.?
That's a really tough one. I mean, I used the phrase yesterday, which you challenged me on. I would say it's path dependent. Depends on all kinds of things. I'm very sorry on
Jargon
that one.
alert.
It's
get it out
dependent.
there. Path dependent. exclusive.
It really depends. I said to you, you'd say that to me. It depends on how much growth we get, how much reform we get, whether we hit the debt ceiling, what the Fed does.
It's just way too academic. I got to leave.
I'm allowed. I know.
This afternoon.
Half dependent.
Way exclusive. He used it twice in 2 days.
So
remarkable.
I'll translate.
Yeah.
So when I think of path dependent, I think, let me give you a number, which is today the number of private sector jobs we have in the economy today is the same we had in the summer of 1999. So we've had 12 years in the United States where the net private sector job creation has been zero.
That's important.
So path dependence means, in part, what we need to do is figure out a set of policies, part of which is fiscal, but part of it's other things, like part of it is fiscal on tax reform, but it's international trade, it's investment, to get private sector investment and job creation going again.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a remarkable debate. The secretary comes out with these not shocking, but sobering statistics. You as a pro were reacted. Do you see any movement forward on this entitlement debate before the first Wednesday of November next year?
Frankly, no, not much. They're hard choices our country faces. We have to make some choices about, we've got some implied promises out there that odds are the country's not going to be able to keep to retirees and for the healthcare system. So part of what we do at Dartmouth is try to figure out ways to slow healthcare costs. But absent that, we're going to face some tough choices.
Let's bring up chart 2, Rex, if you could. I want to look at the deficit here. This is just your basic chart. I think we can just never do this chart enough here. See if you can drag it out there. There, the last of the great debt hills. I named this in honor of the Dartmouth ski hill. They used to take freshmen up there, I assume sober, and push them off the top of the ski jump.
No, I assume not sober, probably.
It was pretty scary. Look at that ski jump of deficit. Bring that up again, Rex, if you could.
The thing we need to remember, of course, when we look at deficit to GDP ratios, Matt's quite right, that we actually lost revenues. But, of course, what happened to the denominator was the denominator fell as well.
Yeah.
So GDP actually fell. So we have this problem, which is revenues fell, but you're dividing it by a smaller GDP number. So that's part of this problem.
That's part of it. Spending went up a lot as well. And part of that was automatic stabilizers, jargon, meaning unemployment insurance goes up, that's right. But a lot of baseline spending went up as well, dramatically in the past couple of years.
Professor Slaughter, the middle ground, the 6 senators. What's the Scoop Jackson middle ground of this debate that many people want to get the polarized towards?
Acknowledging that solving that picture too and doing away with the skiway jump is going to require some cuts in spending and some tax revenue increases. On the latter, I'd point out it'd be great if we could get the conversation more focused on ways to not increase a lot of the marginal tax rates, but increase tax revenue coming in through simplifying and streamlining the tax code.
Europe just raised their VAT tax, the United Kingdom did. Do you propose a VAT tax for the United States? Do you trust it?
No, I don't. I don't propose that at all. I just think I just want to pick up what Matt said. In some sense, what you've got to have is a path that's going to hit a set of goals, and it's possible you could actually even hit them faster. I mean, if you have a set of goals and you say we're going to progress, if the economy grows faster than you think, you can actually do this deficit reduction faster. But the converse to that is, if the outcomes are worse, you've got to slow a little. But it has to be outcome dependent. I think we would agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you just say, we're going to deal with the deficit in 3 years, 7 weeks, and 2 days, that's silly.
I want to do a little more on entitlement. Single fact I've heard on my trip here. Your colleague, Andrew Samick. Let's bring it up here right now. The number of the day, Rex, get that up here if you could. The number of the day, 1.2% of GDP. Social Security is an in perpetuity drag on GDP of 1.2% per year forever, if you run through all the numbers. And this is important. This is not nearly as big a problem as Medicare, is it, Matthew Slaughter?
No. The problem with Medicare and Medicaid is on top of the same demographics that drive that healthcare number, is healthcare that drive the Social Security number is the rise in healthcare costs that has been there for decades, and all reasonable people think is going to persist for decades.
I want you two reasonable academics to talk about raising the retirement age right now. Shouldn't we just get it on a glide path?
Well, I think we should. The speed at which we do it will matter, but you ought to think this is something on a bipartisan basis you can get people to agree on. We simply are all living longer. The retirement was set up for people to live for a certain time period. Now we live for longer. Healthcare costs are higher. We could certainly start the path going, perhaps at 1 year every 5 or something. Every 5 years we raise the retirement age by 1. But we have to start to do that We can argue about the speed.
Right. Where should it go to? Where should it go to, Matthew?
Oh, if we increased it by a couple years, and we combined that, and we could phase that in over 20, 30, 40 years, and given, as Danny points out, rising longevity, that's reasonable. And then you phase in a little bit of means testing, again, higher income, high wealth people. That shortfall in Social Security largely goes away.
My observation is the students are louder getting out of class on a Friday than they are on a Thursday.
They're excited to get to the library. They're going to study hard.
They're going to study all weekend. Let's bring up an op-ed here from Matthew Slaughter. And it's from, I believe, January. There it is, comparative advantage. Comparative advantage. And American jobs, excessive government backing of particular companies and industries typically squanders taxpayer resources. Give us the MBA update here. How do we get that investment David was talking about? How do we do that?
Great question. You look at surveys of CEOs in the U.S. of both large and small businesses, it's still the case that one of the biggest challenges that they're reporting for constraining their jobs and hiring in America, capital investment, is uncertainty over government policy. That's always the case for firms. There's always uncertainty about what the government's going to do. But in the wake of the financial crisis, with the breadth of what the government has done, and with the uncertainty on the fiscal side, uncertainty about healthcare costs, uncertainty about corporate tax rates, trade laws, firms are facing a lot more uncertainty right now, and that matters for jobs.
20 seconds. What's the tuck difference?
The tuck difference, we aim to have our MBA students go out and be business leaders that can understand these issues. We try to give them as broad of an education as possible. Not that we know all the answers, but we're going to give them the critical thinking skills that will allow them to ask the right questions and rise to the highest levels of leadership.
Great. Matthew Slaughter, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated from Tuck. Perfect to have him on.